Prince William's family stuns in symbolic coronation appearance. The sun shone bright over London on the big day of King Charles's coronation. Prince William stood in front of his mirror, fixing his military uniform one last time. He took a deep breath as he prepared for this important day. His wife Catherine walked into the room wearing a beautiful white dress with gold patterns sewn into it. She looked both royal and kind as she helped their 3 children get ready. "Are you all set?" Catherine asked softly, seeing the serious look on her husband's face. William nodded and smiled at his family. Young Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were dressed in special clothes that matched the royal tradition, but still looked fresh and modern. The children were trying hard not to move too much and wrinkle their outfits, but excitement made little Louis bounce on his toes. "Remember what we talked about," William told the children as servants announced their car was ready. "Today is a very important day for Grandpa and for our whole family." George, now second in line to be king someday, stood up straighter. Even at his young age, he seemed to understand how big this day was. Charlotte, always good at following rules, nodded seriously while fixing her small tiara. Louis just grinned, too young to fully grasp everything, but happy to be part of the event. The royal family walked outside where a fancy carriage waited for them. Horses with shiny coats stood ready to pull them through the streets of London to Westminster Abbey, the old church where kings and queens had been crowned for hundreds of years. As they settled into the carriage, William looked out at the palace workers who bowed slightly as they passed. So much had changed in the past year. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had died after ruling for many decades. His father had become King Charles, and William himself had moved up, now just one step away from being king. Catherine reached over and squeezed his hand, knowing without words what he was thinking. They had been together through so many changes, and she could always tell when he was feeling the weight of his royal duties. "The children look perfect," she said, changing the subject to something happier. The carriage began moving through the palace gates and onto the London streets. Right away, they could hear people cheering. Thousands of people lined the road, waving flags and taking pictures. Some had camped out all night just to get a good spot to see the royal family pass by. William waved to the crowds, his face showing the perfect mix of happiness and seriousness that he had learned over years of public appearances. The people loved seeing the whole family together. Many held signs welcoming the new king, but just as many had messages for William, Catherine, and their children. "Look at all the people," Louis said, pressing his face against the window. Charlotte gently pulled him back, reminding him to sit properly like they had practiced. As their carriage moved slowly through the crowds, William pointed out special landmarks to the children. This ride was more than just getting from one place to another. It was a chance for the people to see their future king and his family. Every wave, every smile was captured by cameras and would be shown around the world. Inside the carriage, though, they were just a family. Catherine fixed George's collar one more time. William answered Louis's many questions. Charlotte sat perfectly, already understanding her role in this royal play. The famous Westminster Abbey came into view, its tall towers reaching to the sky. Outside its doors stood important people from around the world: presidents, prime ministers, kings, and queens from other countries. All had come to see King Charles officially become the ruler of the United Kingdom. William felt his heart beat faster as the carriage slowed down. Soon they would walk into the abbey, and the ceremony would begin. He would stand beside his father, showing everyone the line of succession: the current king and the future king together. "Ready?" Catherine asked the family, her calm voice steadying them all. William nodded, straightened his back, and prepared to step out into the bright lights and the watching eyes of the world. The royal carriage stopped in front of Westminster Abbey. Prince William stepped out first, then turned to help Catherine and the children. Cameras flashed from every direction as the family stood together on the red carpet. The old stone church towered above them, its history going back almost 1,000 years. Remember to smile, William whispered to his children as they began walking toward the big wooden doors. George walked tall beside his father, trying to copy his steady, royal walk. Charlotte held her mother's hand, her eyes taking in all the famous faces in the crowd. Little Louis stayed close to Catherine, sometimes hiding behind her dress when the noise got too loud. Inside the abbey, the air felt cool and smelled of candles and old books. The ceiling was so high that Louis had to tip his head all the way back to see it. Colorful light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns on the stone floor. "This way," said a man in a fancy uniform, leading the family to their special seats. The inside of the church was filled with important people from all over the world. Kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers nodded respectfully as the family passed by. William guided his family to their seats in the front row. From here, they would have the perfect view of King Charles when he arrived. Catherine helped arrange the children, making sure they were comfortable, but also sitting properly. This ceremony would last several hours, and even grown-ups found it hard to sit still that long. "When will Grandpa get here?" asked Louis, his voice a bit too loud in the quiet church. "Soon," Catherine answered softly. "Remember what we practiced. When the music starts, we all stand up." William looked around the abbey, taking in the amazing sight. The walls were covered with flags and special decorations. Gold and red cloth hung from the ceiling. Every inch of the church was cleaned and polished for this special day. In the center stood the coronation chair, over 700 years old, where his father would sit to be crowned king. George leaned over to his father. "Will I sit in that chair someday?" he asked quietly. William nodded. "Yes, but not for a very long time." The idea made William think about the long line of kings and queens before them. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had ruled for 70 years. Before her, there was her father, King George. And now his own father would take the crown. Someday, far in the future, it would be William's turn. And after him, young George. The music suddenly grew louder. Everyone in the abbey stood up. The huge doors opened again, and King Charles entered wearing his royal robes. He walked slowly down the middle of the church, nodding to people as he passed. When he reached the front, he turned and looked at William and his family. For a moment, father and son shared a look that said more than words could. Charles gave a small nod to William, who nodded back. It was a private moment between two men who shared the same unusual destiny. The Archbishop, the most important church leader in England, stepped forward to begin the ceremony. He wore special robes and carried a large book. "Today we crown a new king," the Archbishop said in a voice that filled the whole church. "A king who will serve his people and uphold the laws and traditions of this land." William felt Catherine take his hand as the ceremony began. The children sat still and quiet, understanding that this was a very serious moment. Even Louis seemed to feel the importance, his usually playful face now serious. As the Archbishop began to speak the ancient words of the coronation, William thought about how his life had changed. He was no longer just Prince William. He was now the direct heir to the throne, the Prince of Wales. His family was not just his own private joy, but a symbol of the future of the monarchy. Catherine squeezed his hand, bringing him back to the present moment. Together, they watched as the crown was prepared to be placed on King Charles's head. The coronation ceremony moved forward with all its old traditions. King Charles sat in the ancient wooden chair as the Archbishop spoke the words that had been used for hundreds of years. Prince William watched closely, knowing that someday he would sit in that same chair. The most important moment came when the Archbishop lifted the crown. It was heavy with gold and jewels, including the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond that sparkled in the light from the church windows. The crown was slowly placed on King Charles's head. At that exact moment, William felt a strange feeling pass through him. His father was now truly the king. Catherine noticed the change in her husband's face and placed her hand gently on his arm. She always seemed to know what he was thinking. The children sat very still, their eyes wide as they watched their grandfather become king before their eyes. "Is Grandpa the king now?" whispered Louis to Charlotte. "Yes," she whispered back. "Now be quiet." A loud cheer went up from everyone in the church. "Long live the king," they said together. The sound was so big that it seemed to make the old stone walls shake. Some of the royal guards outside fired their guns into the air as a special salute. After the crown was placed on his head, King Charles stood up. He turned to face the people, now officially their ruler. His eyes found William and his family in the front row. The king gave them a small smile before turning to walk toward his throne. Now came the part where important people would come forward to bow to the new king. First in line was Prince William. He walked forward, his steps slow and careful on the red carpet. When he reached his father, William bowed deeply. It was more than just a son showing respect to his father. It was the future king honoring the current king. Young Prince George watched his father with serious eyes. He knew that someday he would bow to his father, just as William was bowing to his grandfather now. Already, at his young age, George understood something about the path that lay before him. Catherine and the children also came forward to bow and curtsy to the king. Charlotte did a perfect little curtsy that she had practiced for weeks. Louis tried to copy his sister but almost fell over, making some people smile behind their hands. When they returned to their seats, William put his arm around George's shoulders. The boy looked up at his father with questions in his eyes. "Someday," William whispered, "people will bow to you." George nodded slowly, taking in this big thought. He looked at his grandfather on the throne, at his father beside him, and seemed to understand his place in this long line of kings. The ceremony continued with more traditions. The king was given a golden ball called an orb and a special stick called a scepter. These were symbols of his power and responsibility. William explained quietly to his children what each thing meant. "The orb shows that the king rules the world under God," he told them. "And the scepter shows that he has the power to lead and protect his people." Catherine smiled at her husband's words. She was proud of how William was teaching their children about their heritage and responsibilities. The ceremony lasted for hours. Even the adults found it tiring to sit so long in the hard church seats, but the children behaved very well, better than many had expected. Royal watchers later said it showed how well William and Catherine were raising them to understand their duties. As the ceremony finally came to an end, the royal family prepared to leave the abbey. They would go in a grand parade back to the palace, where they would appear on the famous balcony for all the people to see. William took one last look at his father on the throne before leading his family out. King Charles caught his eye and gave him a nod. Father and son understood each other in that moment. The crown had passed to a new head, but the family remained strong. Outside Westminster Abbey, the streets of London were packed with people. They had been waiting all day in the spring sunshine to see the royal family. Police officers kept the crowds behind barriers as a line of beautiful carriages waited to take the royal family back to Buckingham Palace. King Charles came out first in his full royal outfit, the crown still on his head. The crowd went wild with cheers and clapping. Next came Prince William and his family. The people seemed just as excited to see them as they were to see the new king. "Wave to the people," Catherine reminded the children. All three waved their hands, and the crowd loved it. Little Louis, always the most playful, jumped up and down as he waved, making people laugh and point. The family climbed into their carriage for the ride back to the palace. This ride would be different from their journey to the abbey. Now King Charles had been officially crowned, and they were part of a grand parade. "Did I do it right, Mummy?" Charlotte asked as they settled into the carriage. "You were perfect," Catherine told her with a smile. "All of you were wonderful." William looked out at the crowds as their carriage began to move. Union Jack flags waved everywhere he looked. Some people had camped out for days just to get a good spot to see the royal family pass by. Others had traveled from far-away countries just for this moment. "Look at all the people, Papa," said George, who rarely called his father by that name in public. They came to be part of history, William explained. Today is a day that will be remembered for a very long time. The carriage rolled through the famous streets of London. They passed by Big Ben, the giant clock tower, and the Houses of Parliament where the country's laws are made. Everywhere they went, people cheered and took pictures. William thought about how different this was from his normal life. Most days, he tried to give his children as regular a childhood as possible. They went to school, played sports, and did homework like other children. But on days like today, they stepped fully into their royal roles. Catherine seemed to read his thoughts. They handled it all so well, she said quietly. The parade route took them down the Mall, the wide road that leads straight to Buckingham Palace. Here the crowds were biggest of all. The road was lined with trees and decorated with more flags than anyone could count. As they got closer to the palace, they could see that the famous balcony was being prepared. Soon, they would stand there with King Charles and wave to the huge crowd in front of the palace gates. Louis bounced on his seat with excitement. "Will there be planes?" he asked. He loved the fighter jets that often flew over during big royal events. "Yes," William told him. "There will be a fly past by the Royal Air Force." Inside the palace gates, staff members waited to help the royal family from their carriages. The king arrived first, followed by William and his family. Other members of the royal family had already arrived and waited inside. The palace was a busy place on this special day. Servants rushed around carrying trays of food and drinks. Guards stood at attention in their bright red uniforms and tall black hats. Everyone had a job to do to make sure this historic day went perfectly. William led his family through the grand hallways of the palace. They passed paintings of kings and queens from long ago. George looked up at them, perhaps wondering if his own picture would hang here someday. They reached a waiting room where they would rest for a few minutes before going out onto the balcony. Catherine helped the children tidy themselves up after the long ceremony and carriage ride. William straightened his uniform and medals. A palace worker came to tell them it was almost time. In just a few minutes, they would step out onto the famous balcony of Buckingham Palace, where royal families had appeared for generations. It would be the perfect ending to this historic day, showing the world the current king and the future kings standing together. The moment arrived for the royal family to step onto the famous Buckingham Palace balcony. Palace workers opened the tall glass doors. King Charles went first, still wearing his crown and royal robes. The crowd in front of the palace roared with excitement when they saw him. Prince William and Catherine followed with their 3 children. They lined up perfectly along the balcony rail, just as they had practiced. From here, they could see thousands of people packed into the area in front of the palace gates. The crowd stretched far back, filling the streets as far as they could see. "Wave to everyone," William told the children. All 3 waved their hands high. The sight of the young princes and princess made the crowd cheer even louder. King Charles stepped forward and raised his hand to the people. This was his big moment as the new king. William stood right beside his father, showing everyone the line of succession. First the current king, then the future king, then little Prince George, who would be king someday far in the future. Catherine made sure the children were behaving properly, but she needn't have worried. Even Louis, normally so full of energy and mischief, seemed to understand how important this moment was. He waved happily, but stayed in his spot between his brother and sister. Suddenly, the sound of airplane engines filled the air. Everyone looked up to see fighter jets from the Royal Air Force flying toward the palace. They streamed red, white, and blue smoke behind them, making the colors of the British flag across the sky. "Look!" shouted Louis, pointing up at the planes. His excited face made many people in the crowd smile. The jets roared overhead in perfect formation. It was the traditional fly past that marked the end of big royal occasions. The children's faces lit up with wonder as they watched the spectacular show in the sky. When the fly past was over, the royal family stayed on the balcony for a few more minutes, waving to the crowds. Photographers took countless pictures that would appear in newspapers and magazines around the world the next day. These images would show not just a royal family, but the future of the monarchy for decades to come. Finally, it was time to go back inside. The family turned and walked through the tall doors, disappearing from public view. Once inside, they could finally relax after the long, formal day. "You were all wonderful," Catherine told her children as they walked through the palace halls. "Can we take these fancy clothes off now?" asked Louis, pulling at his collar. William laughed. "Yes, I think we've earned the right to be comfortable." In a private room, away from the cameras and crowds, the royal family could finally be themselves. King Charles joined them, carefully setting his heavy crown on a special cushion. He looked tired but happy. "Well done, all of you," the king said to his grandchildren. "Especially you three young ones. You made your old grandfather very proud today." The children beamed at his praise. Even though he was now the king, to them he was still just Grandpa. Charles sat down heavily in a chair, and servants quickly brought tea and small sandwiches for everyone. William watched his father with new eyes. The crown might be put aside for now, but its weight never truly left the wearer. Today, Charles had taken on that weight officially. Someday, it would pass to William. As if sensing his thoughts, Catherine came to stand beside her husband. "He did well today," she said quietly. "And so did you." William nodded, grateful for her steady support. Through all the changes in his life, Catherine had been his constant. Together, they were raising their children to understand their special place in the world, while still giving them as normal a childhood as possible. The palace staff moved quietly around them, bringing food and drinks, and taking away the formal parts of their outfits. Outside, the crowds were slowly dispersing, but the excitement of the day would live on in memories and photographs. For now, the royal family could enjoy a quiet moment together. Tomorrow would bring new duties and responsibilities. But today, they had shown the world the strength and unity of the monarchy. King Charles on his throne, Prince William by his side, and the young princes and princess growing into their roles as the future of the royal family. The next morning, Prince William woke early. The excitement of the coronation day was still fresh in his mind. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Catherine, who was still sleeping, and walked to the window to look out at the palace gardens. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in soft colors. On the streets outside the palace, workers were already cleaning up from yesterday's big event. They picked up flags and empty bottles, sweeping the roads clean. It was amazing how quickly things went back to normal after such a historic day. William went to check on his children. All three were still asleep, tired out from the long day before. George had kicked off his blankets as usual. William gently covered him again and smiled at his son's peaceful face. Someday this boy would be King of England. Downstairs, palace staff moved quietly, preparing for the day ahead. They nodded respectfully to William as he passed. A servant offered him tea, which he accepted gratefully. "The newspapers, sir," said the servant, handing William a stack of morning papers. Every front page showed pictures from yesterday's coronation. Some featured King Charles in his crown and robes. Others showed William and his family on the palace balcony. One paper had a beautiful picture of little Louis waving excitedly at the flypast. William smiled as he looked through the pictures. The papers all said the same thing. The coronation had been perfect, a wonderful mix of ancient tradition and modern touches. Many commented on how well-behaved the royal children had been, and how William and Catherine were raising them to understand their royal duties. One headline caught William's eye: "Three Kings: Charles, William, and George. The future of the monarchy secure." The picture showed the three of them together at the ceremony. William felt the weight of that headline. Yes, the line was secure, but being king was about much more than just wearing a crown. He heard footsteps and looked up to see Catherine entering the room, already dressed for the day. She looked fresh and elegant in a simple blue dress. "You're up early," she said, coming to kiss him on the cheek. "Couldn't sleep, William admitted. Too much on my mind. Catherine looked at the newspapers spread out in front of him. The children look wonderful, she said, pointing to a picture of Charlotte doing her perfect curtsy. They did us proud yesterday. They really did, William agreed. They're growing up understanding their place in all this. A palace worker came in to tell them that King Charles wanted to see them. They found him in his private office, already hard at work despite the big day before. Being king was a job that never stopped. Ah, William, Catherine, Charles greeted them warmly. I wanted to thank you both for yesterday. Everything went perfectly, and the children were wonderful. Thank you, Father, William said. It still felt strange to see his father behind the desk that had been his grandmother's for so long. The crown looks good on you, Catherine told her father-in-law with a smile. Charles laughed softly. Heavy, though, both literally and in all it stands for. He looked at William. A weight you'll carry someday. William nodded, understanding perfectly. The two men shared a look that said more than words could. The crown passed from parent to child, down through generations. With it came great privilege, but also great responsibility. They heard the sounds of children's voices in the hallway. A moment later, the door burst open, and in came George, Charlotte, and Louis, still in their pajamas, despite their nanny's efforts to get them dressed first. Grandpa, Louis shouted, running to give King Charles a hug. The others followed more carefully, remembering their manners even in their excitement. Charles hugged each of his grandchildren. For a moment, he wasn't the king but simply a grandfather enjoying his family. Did you like being crowned king, Grandpa? Charlotte asked. It was a very special day, Charles told her. Made even better because all of you were there to see it. The family spent the morning together, talking about the big day and looking at pictures that were already being printed in special books about the coronation. These books would be kept forever in the palace library, a record of this historic moment for future generations. William watched his father with his children and felt a deep sense of continuity. The monarchy had lasted for over 1,000 years because each generation taught the next about their duties and responsibilities. Now it was his turn to prepare George just as Charles had prepared him. A week after the coronation, life in the royal family settled into a new normal. King Charles was busy with his royal duties, attending meetings and signing papers. Prince William had more responsibilities too, now that he was officially the Prince of Wales and next in line to the throne. William sat in his office at Kensington Palace, reading reports and preparing for an important meeting. His office walls had pictures of his family, mixed with historic photos of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, and other royals from the past. These reminded him of the long history he was part of. Your meeting with the charity leaders starts in 10 minutes, sir, his secretary said, poking her head around the door. William nodded and stood up, straightening his tie. Since the coronation, people had been watching him even more closely. Everyone wanted to know what kind of Prince of Wales he would be, and what kind of king he might become in the future. Before leaving his office, William picked up his phone to check a message from Catherine. She was at a school opening today. The message included a photo of her surrounded by smiling children holding flowers. William smiled at the picture. Catherine was so good at these events, always making people feel comfortable around her. The charity meeting went well. William had always cared deeply about helping homeless people, and today he was meeting with leaders of organizations that provided housing and support. He listened carefully to their ideas and challenges. We need more attention on this issue, said one charity leader. Having your support makes a real difference, sir. William nodded seriously. This has always been important to me. Now that I'm Prince of Wales, I want to use this position to help even more. After the meeting, William had lunch with his team to discuss future plans. Now that his father was king, William had inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, a large collection of lands and properties that belonged to the Prince of Wales. The money from these properties helped support William's family and his charitable work. We should focus on making these lands more environmentally friendly, William told his team. My father did good work with this, and I want to continue and expand it." His team took notes and suggested ideas. William had strong opinions about protecting nature and fighting climate change. He wanted to use his new role to make real improvements in these areas. In the afternoon, William visited a hospital to meet with doctors, nurses, and patients. He always felt comfortable in hospitals, perhaps because his mother, Princess Diana, had spent so much time visiting the sick and injured. He stopped to talk with a young boy who was recovering from surgery. The boy was shy at first, but soon he was showing William his favorite toy car. "I have a son about your age," William told him. "He loves cars too." The boy smiled widely. "Is he a prince?" "Yes, he is," William said with a smile. "But he's just a normal boy too, who likes cars and games, and sometimes doesn't want to do his homework." This made the boy laugh. His parents stood nearby, clearly touched that Prince William was taking time to make their son feel special. As William walked through the hospital halls, many people wanted to shake his hand or take a picture. He was patient with everyone, listening to their stories and thanking the medical staff for their hard work. On his way back to Kensington Palace, William called Catherine to see how her day had gone. They tried to check in with each other when they were doing separate events. "The school opening was lovely," Catherine told him. "The children had so many questions about the coronation. One little girl asked if I wear my tiara to bed." William laughed. "What did you tell her?" "That tiaras are very uncomfortable to sleep in, of course," Catherine said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. When William arrived home, he found George and Charlotte doing homework at the kitchen table while Louis built a tower of blocks on the floor. For a moment, he just watched them. These three children who were growing up in such an unusual world of palaces and public duties. 1 month after the coronation, Prince William and Catherine attended their first big international event as the Prince and Princess of Wales. They were invited to a royal wedding in Sweden, where a princess was marrying her longtime boyfriend. The couple left their children at home with their nanny. George and Charlotte were back in school, and Louis was too young for such a formal event. Before leaving, William and Catherine spent extra time with the children. "We'll only be gone for 2 days," Catherine promised as she hugged Louis goodbye. "Bring me back something from Sweden," Charlotte requested, always interested in other countries and cultures. "Maybe a Viking helmet," added George with a grin. William laughed. "I'm not sure they wear those anymore, but we'll find something special." The trip to Sweden was carefully planned. William and Catherine would represent not just themselves but King Charles and the whole United Kingdom. Since the coronation, they had taken on more international duties to help the new king. On the plane, they reviewed their schedule. "The wedding is tomorrow," Catherine said, looking at her notes. "Today we have lunch with the King and Queen of Sweden, then a visit to a children's hospital." William nodded. "I've been reading about their children's healthcare system. They're doing some innovative things we could learn from." When they landed in Stockholm, the Swedish capital, royal cars were waiting to take them to the palace. Catherine wore a beautiful blue coat that matched her sapphire earrings, once owned by Princess Diana. William was in a dark suit with his military medals. The Swedish royal family welcomed them warmly. The King of Sweden had known William since he was a boy, and they talked easily about family and royal duties. During lunch, William shared stories about his children that made everyone laugh. Louis asked if Grandpa's crown was made of chocolate. William told them. He was quite disappointed to learn it was only gold. After lunch came the hospital visit. William and Catherine spent time talking to young patients and their families. Catherine sat on the floor to play games with some children, not worrying about her expensive clothes. William kicked a softball around with boys who were well enough to play. A doctor showed them a new treatment room they had built for children with cancer. "This is amazing," William said, clearly impressed. "We should consider something like this for our children's hospitals back home." Catherine agreed. "The way they've made it less scary for the children is wonderful." That evening, There was a dinner at the royal palace with guests from many countries. William and Catherine sat at the main table with the Swedish royal family. Many people commented on how well they represented the United Kingdom. "They are the future of the British monarchy," one diplomat was overheard saying. "King Charles is fortunate to have such strong support in them." The next day was the royal wedding. The ceremony was held in a beautiful old cathedral in Stockholm. Catherine wore a pink dress with a matching hat, while William was in his formal morning suit. They sat near the front with other royal guests from around Europe. During the ceremony, William and Catherine held hands. Those sitting nearby noticed how they whispered to each other at special moments. Even after years of marriage and 3 children, they still seemed very much in love. After the wedding came a boat trip through Stockholm's famous waterways. The Swedish royal family had arranged for guests to see their beautiful city from the water. William and Catherine stood at the front of the boat, waving to people who had gathered on bridges and along the shore to see the royal visitors. "The Swedish people really love their royal family," Catherine said. William nodded. "Just like our people supported my grandmother for so many years. That kind of love and respect has to be earned." At the wedding reception, William gave a short speech congratulating the bride and groom. He spoke about love and commitment in a way that showed he was thinking of his own marriage. "A strong partnership is the greatest gift," he said, "especially for those of us who live much of our lives in the public eye." Many guests commented on his words, saying they showed wisdom and experience beyond his years. Some remembered him as a young boy at his mother's funeral, and marveled at the strong, confident man he had become. 6 months after the coronation, Buckingham Palace announced a special documentary about the royal family. Film crews had been quietly following King Charles, Prince William, and their families to show how they worked together in their royal roles. The idea came from King Charles himself. He wanted people to see how the monarchy was moving forward into a new era. Prince William agreed it was a good idea to be more open with the public. "People should see that we're a real family as well as a royal one," William told the documentary team. "That's always been important to me." The filming took place over several weeks. Cameras followed King Charles as he carried out his duties as monarch. They also spent time with William, Catherine, and their children, showing their daily life as well as their public appearances. One day, the cameras filmed at William and Catherine's home. They showed the family having breakfast together before school. George and Charlotte wore their school uniforms while Louis played with his cereal. It was a normal family scene that happened to take place in a palace. "Have you finished your homework?" Catherine asked George as she helped Louis with his breakfast. "Yes, Mum," George answered. "I did it last night." Charlotte piped up. "I've been practicing my piano piece for the school concert." William, looking at his phone while drinking his tea, smiled at his daughter. "We can't wait to hear it." Later that day, the documentary team filmed William at his office, where he was working on plans for a project to help homeless young people. This was a cause close to his heart, inspired by his mother, Princess Diana's work. "My mother took me to homeless shelters when I was a boy," William explained to the camera. "She wanted me to understand that being a prince came with responsibilities to help others." The documentary also showed Catherine working on her early childhood development projects. She visited a nursery school where she sat in tiny chairs with the children, helping them with art projects and reading them stories. "The first 5 years of life are so important," she told the teachers. "What happens in these years shapes everything that comes after." The filmmakers captured sweet moments between William and Catherine when they thought the cameras weren't rolling. He would touch her back gently as they walked into a room together. She would straighten his tie before an important meeting. These small gestures showed their strong bond after years of marriage. The most popular scenes in the documentary were those showing the children. George was growing more serious as he understood more about his future role. Charlotte was confident and poised, always ready with a curtsy or a wave to crowds. And Louis brought laughter with his energetic personality and funny comments. In one scene, William was showing George some old photos of Queen Elizabeth's coronation. "This will be me someday," George said thoughtfully. and then it will be you." William nodded, but not for a very long time. "First, you need to grow up, go to school, maybe university, and learn all about the world." "And have adventures?" George asked hopefully. "Definitely have adventures," William agreed with a smile. The documentary showed how the coronation had changed things for the family. William had new titles and responsibilities as Prince of Wales. The children were more visible in public. But it also showed how William and Catherine worked hard to give their children as normal a life as possible. Near the end of the documentary, there was a special interview with King Charles and Prince William together. They sat in a palace room filled with history, talking about their shared vision for the monarchy. "We must protect the traditions that give our country strength," King Charles said. "But we must also change with the times." William nodded in agreement. "The monarchy has lasted for over 1,000 years because it has always adapted. Our job is to make sure it remains relevant and helpful to people's lives today." When the documentary aired on television, it was watched by millions of people in Britain and around the world. The reviews were very positive, with many people commenting on how well William and Catherine were preparing their children for their future roles while still giving them a loving, normal childhood. One newspaper headline summed it up perfectly: "The future of the monarchy is in safe hands." The picture showed William with his arm around young Prince George, both of them smiling at the camera. Behind them stood King Charles, watching his son and grandson with pride.